Hey, what's up, everyone? Nick Yuskevich here again with Daily Fantasy Winners. We've got the Valspar Championship up for this episode of Tee to Green. And this is a tournament that's located in Palm Harbor, Florida. And this is located pretty much in the west part of Tampa is where Palm Harbor is at. It's pretty much right along the coast there to the western side of Florida toward the Gulf of Mexico, essentially. And so this is usually the tournament that is the third part of the Florida swing. Oh, however, it's the second tournament of the Florida swing, I guess, just because the WGC was over in Mexico this year. Really not too much of a difference at all. I mean, there's a few people coming over from Mexico to play in this event, but for the most part, pretty much everyone in this field did not play Mexico last week, but either way, it doesn't really mean too much. But just to say that we're kind of in the middle of the Florida swing here, one way or the other. But the only reason why I bring this up as far as the things you need to know about this tournament is usually this is a pretty weak field at the Valspar every year. However, it is particularly weak this year just because, there are a few names that you normally might see here at the Valspar who don't want to play the week after playing the WGC just because it is longer travel. They're coming off of altitude. And also the other reason is the Arnold Palmer Invitational is next week. And the Arnold Palmer invite last year was the field strength to that one, which is usually decent. It's a decent strength field at the Arnold Palmer invite. It was on the weak side last year just because a lot of the players were planning for the Olympics and for the Ryder Cup and things like that. It was just a really hectic season last year, and it was just based upon what events they were trying to prioritize and not overdo it that some people bowed out of the Arnold Palmer invite. But now that obviously this isn't an Olympic year, and on top of that, the unfortunate passing of Arnold Palmer, last year, my guess is that the Arnold Palmer invite will probably have even a particularly good attendance this year. I don't know that and who's all entered exactly, but I'm guessing it'll be a pretty strong field next week. And so just kind of turned out this year that this is a field that's a little bit on the weaker side this year, in particular for the Valspar. And so, in any case, some other things you need to know about this tournament. Obviously, we're back to a normal PGA Tour event now. This is a 72 hole event. Well, obviously they're all 72 holes, but there is a cut, and it's a normal size field of 100 and some odd players. And so the last thing you should know about this tournament is this is pretty much the same, kind of weird salary structure this week. So this is obviously seems to be the norm. I did do a strategy video on this in an episode just a couple days ago. So you should definitely check that out over in our YouTube channel. And it's also posted over at DailyFantasyWinners.com as well. But obviously it's probably easiest to find here on the YouTube channel as you are watching this. And so it's got some good information for you on basically why it's still a good idea to fade the higher owned, lower salary guys in GPPs essentially. And so, and how the new salary structure plays into it. And so, okay, enough about that. This tournament, what do you need to know about the golf course? This is at Innisbrook Resort, and specifically the Copperhead course. This is a par 71 at 7,340 yards. However, most par 71s, usually are just 3 par 5s in the normal amount of par 4, and then, I'm sorry, there's usually 4 par 3s and 3 par 5s, and then the rest par 4s to make up the par 71. However, this is a little bit different here. There are 4 par 5s and 5 par 3s here. Again, I've mentioned it before that you shouldn't be looking at par scoring essentially as one of your statistics. So even though it's a little bit different, you don't need to do that for this. But the only thing that is important about this though is that we want to take a look at the 4 par 5s obviously, just because there might be more eagle opportunities. So we take a look at the 4 par 5s. We have hole 1 at 560 yards, number 5 at 605, number 11 at 575, and number 14 at 590. All of them are pretty lengthy, obviously. The shortest one's number 1 at 560. Last year, number 1 gave up 14 eagles, and last year also number 14 at 590 gave up 9 eagles. However, there have been in years past where none of the holes really give up any eagles other than some hole outs, or maybe one of the bombers does happen to get on the green in 2 and convert the eagle putt. And so in any case, are longer hitters good here for eagles? Yes, they are, because these are some longer par 5s. They don't have to be bombers. When I say this, it does not mean you have to be, I mean, obviously I know Dustin Johnson is in this field, or it's not like you need Bubba Watson. I think he's in this field as well. or not as well, but Bubba is in this field, not DJ, of course. So you don't need guys that are, the top 5, top 10 driving distance guys, but you want to make sure you don't have the guys that are, the shortest hitters on tour when it comes to the Eagles. And so it doesn't mean you can't watch them, period, but I just wouldn't load up on like 5 or 6 short length hitters, because then you really are limiting your upside in your GPPs. And so, and that'll obviously hurt you, because Eagles scoring is, it's very good. It's obviously a big increase from an eagle to a birdie. And so, and also and for this year also, I'll just say this, that, it is possible that maybe there won't be any Eagles this year, or there'll only be a few and they'll be very rare and it won't matter as much. But of course, you'd rather err on the safe side a little bit and making sure you have at least a few decent length hitters on your team, just to make sure you're covering yourself for those Eagles. But okay, some actual details more about the course in terms of like, what it looks like, I guess. This is a golf course that is relatively on the tight side, and it's still got some decent length to it, but it's not over the top long. It's heavily wooded, a lot of tree line fairways, but it's also like I said, it's heavily wooded, and so it's not just like, okay, 2 golf holes running parallel to one another and there's just one tree, in a tree line running straight down. No, we're talking like several trees, winding through the woods and everything like that. So it's not good when you when you hit it way offline. There are a lot of bunkers on this golf course. There is water on this golf course, but it's more comes into play with your approach shots as opposed to driving the golf ball. It comes into play a little bit driving the golf ball, don't get me wrong, but it more comes into play with the approach shots. And the other thing I'll also add is, like I said, it's 7,300 and how long did I say? 7,340 yards. What you'll notice a lot of times with these golf holes is that there's a great variety in length among them. Like the par 5s are long and the par 3s are on the long side. All the par 3s I think are between 190, like 230 yards or so. But as far as the par 4s go, there's great variety. They range all the way from like 360 all the way to like 500 basically. And I will say that, they all, you're going to use all the clubs in the bag on the par 4s. And so I don't really think there's going to be one type of approach shot you're going to see a bunch of over another. And in any case, so let's just get right into the strategy, and I'll kind of feed off of what I just said. There are 2 things statistically we're going to look at here for strategy. It is strokes gained approaching the green and strokes gained putting, and which is a little bit fascinating just because those two specifically don't usually correlate that much over the others. Only in that usually one is a little bit more of a ball striking course, or one is usually a little bit more of a good putter's course. That's, generally speaking, that's how it usually pops up. Not all the time, but it's usually kind of how it pops up. But this is for both. But it does make sense on this. And so when it comes to Innisbrook, here, like when I was describing about driving the golf ball, and that, yeah, it's kind of on the tight side, but the water doesn't come into play as much on the driving the golf ball side. So basically what I'm talking about here is, yeah, you're not going to run into a lot of penalty strokes off the tee. Like if you hit it way offline, then yeah, you're going to be dead in the woods. But there is some room in the rough. There's fairway bunkers. It's not so much water hazards, or you're just completely dead, like a couple yards off the fairway. It's not that tough of a driving golf course. But the approach shots are to small greens, and there's often a lot of water around the greens, or there's just well-positioned bunkers around the greens. So this is definitely a ball-striking golf course from that perspective. Then as far as the strokes gained putting point comes in here, these greens are relatively easy. And if you heard me talk about this in the past, this would have gone all the way back to something in January, is something I statistically went back and looked at over some data, is that usually the easier the greens are, the more important putting is, which goes against a common belief or theory that people think the tougher the greens are, the more putting comes into play. But it's actually the opposite when it comes to putting. And so that's why you see some ball striking, and that's why you see some putting essentially come into this course. So it's a little bit tough when making your picks, just because, yeah, usually the golfers that are really good in strokes gained approaching the green and strokes gained putting are usually just like, the best players like on tour, because they're really important. And so it's a little bit tough making picks from that perspective. So we're going to have to look at some other things to combine those 2 things with. Another thing we can look at, I mentioned this at the Honda Classic, the same thing goes here. Good Florida history. A lot of Florida golf courses are somewhat, the Florida courses are more similar to one another than courses you'll find in like any other state or any other area of the country, just because Florida is relatively flat. The Valspar is a little bit hillier. It's not completely flat, but it's nothing like you'd play in like California or on the West Coast. It's absolutely nothing like that, especially not like what it was in Mexico. And so you can use some good Florida history here, not just course history from the Valspar, but good Florida history overall. Recent performance is always a good thing, of course. And recent performance is a little bit more important now that everybody's got at least a handful of rounds under their belts. So recent performance is a little bit more important now than it was, back in January when we were on the West Coast. And then that is pretty much it. Of course, on top of, you want to make sure you have at least a few decent length hitters just to make sure that they make eagles or have the eagle opportunity. And the one thing I want to bring in here is there's going to be a lot of people talking about driving accuracy and it being important here. If you just use the statistic driving accuracy, that's not going to help you that much. That's going to be misleading. And I'll mention this why. You're going to see Justin Thomas is the most expensive golfer on DraftKings this week. However, if you look at Justin Thomas's course history, or excuse me, his Florida golf history, just generally speaking, it's pretty good. I believe he finished second in the Players Championship last year, and actually Jason Day won the Players Championship last year. And I bring those two guys up in that example up specifically for a reason, and that is because those guys are bombers, and more Thomas than Day. When they hit drivers, they can often be like pretty far off target. And Justin's driving accuracy has been pretty bad this year, if you just look at driving accuracy. But the reason why they're able to do well sometimes on these ball striking golf courses is because they will usually hit like fairway woods or long irons off the tee. Like Jason Day, when he won the Players Championship, he pretty much hit 2-iron off the tee the entire tournament, and he crushed the field. And so sometimes you get these bombers who maybe aren't that great driving accuracy. Some of them are good at course management, and they have a go-to utility club or fairway wood or long iron type of a thing. So you shouldn't go just straight off of driving accuracy in that regard. But at the same time, like, yes, you want players who are hitting like the ball well from like a strokes gained tee to green and a strokes gained approaching the green standpoint. Like, that is important. You see, if you get what I mean, they're kind of on the balance of that. So hopefully those are the things you guys all get there from a strategy standpoint. And then back to the traditional pick or two here from the expensive side of things, and then I'll have the usual list of players up on DailyFantasyWinners.com, including the usual lists of just favorite plays in each salary range, and then, of course, the a few guys I would recommend fading for high ownership in GPPs of the lower price golfers. And so, okay, so for the most expensive end, I like Henrik Stenson a lot this week at $11,700, and a lot of people were burned last week because he withdrew, obviously, with a stomach bug. And I will just say this, like, if you were worried about a WD again, I very highly doubt that'll happen again. And I would just challenge anybody. It's like, go find me somebody that's withdrawn 2 weeks in a row, especially when it has nothing to do with an injury. That, like, it basically does not happen. And so it's essentially to say, if Stenson is sick, he will not tee off and then withdraw again immediately. I don't think that's going to happen unless he really wants to just get a paycheck and gain bad publicity. But I don't think he'll do that. Stenson's not the guy to do that, I don't think. So in any case, Henrik I'd like a lot because he's been in great form. Been in great form this year when he was playing over on the European Tour. And a lot of people, we don't care about ownership too much here from the most expensive players, but a lot of people probably will be hesitant of taking Stenson just because of him withdrawing last week, even though they probably shouldn't be. And then also, it's a little bit tougher to make lineups this week just to go with the most expensive guys and some cheaper guys, just because the field strength isn't that great this week. But even so, like, I would just say even the golfers in the 8K range, like upper 8K range, the lower 8K range and the upper 7K range, like, I just don't see that much difference between those guys and the guys in the mid 7K range. Like, it's just weak enough that, like, I don't think there's that much difference between the 8K and 7K range this week that I'm like that worried about it just from a cut and made standpoint. The 8K guys maybe have a little bit more upside, but at the same time, I really wouldn't be too concerned about it. So Stenson would be my top play this week overall. There's nothing wrong with Justin Thomas. I know he fell off a little bit there last Sunday, but he's obviously got good form. And like I said before, he has good Florida history, and he's actually played pretty well at this tournament. But I would just say I like Stenson just a touch more. We're splitting hairs a little bit, but I do like Stenson a little bit more, and so probably owned a little bit less as well. And then the other guy I'm going to bring up, I'm going to drop all the way down to the 9K range, and I'm going to say Ryan Moore at $9,000 as well. He is somebody who has had a couple missed cuts here, but they were like 4 or 5 years ago. He's had a lot of like top 5, top 6 finishes here. He's had good course history here. And the one thing I like about Ryan Moore in particular, what I've really seen since he made that push, down the stretch of last season, made the Ryder Cup team, and obviously played very well. He's maintained a pretty darn good level of consistency after that. Like he hasn't really trailed off, and so I think Ryan Moore at 9K being at the same price of guys of like Charles Howell, Bill Haas, Gary Woodland, Charles Schwartzel, defending champ, Kevin Na. Like I think that's a very good reasonable price for Ryan Moore. And the cool thing is, if you look at our odds per dollar tab on DailyFantasyWinners.com, you'll see that a couple of those guys in the 9K range all pretty much have the same odds. And so, yeah, Moore will have probably some decent ownership, and that's fine. But at the same time, like I just don't think it's going to be like incredible or like off the charts here. And it'll be his salary will be inflated, or excuse me, his ownership will be inflated a little bit, but it won't be awful. And so, Stenson and Moore are my 2 favorite plays this week. I'll have the rest of the picks up on DailyFantasyWinners.com as usual. I got a little bit delayed here. I'm recording this like pretty late Tuesday night. And so, in any case, I'll get to that as quickly as I can on Wednesday. I had a power outage at my house for reasons that aren't worth getting into, but thanks to the city people. But in any case, I'll get to it as soon as I can, and hopefully it won't be too delayed on that. And so we'll have the stuff there. And so thank you for watching. And lastly, just kind of a schedule update. So we've got the Arnold Palmer Invitational next week. We'll have T Degree then. The week after that is the WGC Match Play. And there's also the Puerto Rico Open that week as well. And the DraftKings does their events for the Puerto Rico Open usually. But I will not be doing Tee to Green that week for the Puerto Rico Open. I've got a few other prior commitments and do a couple other things, getting ready for baseball season with DFS, some prep, to do with Daily Fantasy Winners and things like that, and a couple other odds and ends. And so the only way if somehow miraculously like DraftKings decides to do something for the match play, which I can't really foresee. If they did that, that would be amazing, and maybe I'll do a Tee to Green episode for that. But if not, and assuming it's usually just the Puerto Rico Open, won't be doing a Tee to Green episode that week, and I will throw out some stats for you on the forum over at the website, and then just any kind of like general thoughts like here and there a little bit. But I probably won't have much for you that week, unfortunately. But what I will do is have at least another strategy video for you before we lead up to Houston and the Masters. So I'll get one of those going for you again. Here in the next couple of weeks. And so, we're only a month away from Augusta, and it'll be pretty exciting. And we'll have some cool new tools here to show you here in the near future that are just about finalized. So, all right, thanks for watching, everybody. You can follow me at Nicky Skevich on Twitter. Daily Fantasy Winners is on Twitter at DFantasyWinners. And thanks to everybody who are liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel and all the videos. All right, thanks and good luck.